Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
And welcome to the GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is the awesome, the brilliant, the fantastic
80s Music Girl.
That's her. Yes. So glad to have you back again, 80s Music Girl. Tonight's
Thank you,
episode, The Incredible Hulk, Season 4, Episode 12. Episode 12? Oh, goodness. The first Part 1. First air date, March 6th, 1981. David Barr travels to Visceria, where another Hulk was sighted years before. He finds the lab where the creature originated. A man claims to have been the first Hulk, and most importantly, to have a cure. Directed by Frank Orsatti, writers were Kenneth Johnson and Andrew Schneider. This is an interesting episode, to say the least. Because we don't get a Hulk out until very late in this. And first, before any of that, we actually get just a random murder mystery. It opens up with, of all things, a group of teenagers traveling down the road at unsafe speeds.
During a storm.
During a storm, yeah, with no seatbelts in the car.
Absolutely.
But, fortunately, they, even though they ram head-on into a tree, man, I guess these, 1970s sports cars, they were made out of sterner stuff.
Yeah, they were. Unfortunately, their engines were a bit crap, but,
yeah,
you hit a tree, your engine dies. What can I say?
Yeah, well, I don't know if engines normally survive trees in this day and age either. It's, as my mom always said, the tree always has the right of way.
Yes.
If you see the tree,
your mom's a very wise woman.
Even if it's coming right at you, you stop, you let the tree pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had some very neat characters here. Harry Towns, of course, plays Del Fry, and Harry Towns has been in just about everything. He is an actor with credits as long as your arm. Going up until 1988 and starting in 1949. So,
wow.
Yeah, the guy has had a long career as an actor. But you know who I was most excited by in this? Although not until well, actually, I was excited by him. And that is Dick Durock. Who
is he?
Who is he? Dick Durock is the actor who plays the first Hulk.
Right, that I knew.
Yeah,
I just didn't know who he was.
Yeah, well, he does a lot of big guy characters and a lot of things. He's been a thug. He's been a guy named Ivan. He's been henchman and
for two.
Yeah, he's been a lot of guys. But what really fascinated me as I went through his IMDb, not only is he Frey's creature, but he also played the Swamp Thing.
Did he?
Yes, he was in the 1990s version of the Swamp Thing as the Swamp Thing. So he's doing the physical body of the Swamp Thing. He is in the I'm trying to find it here. Oh, he's also in a bunch of episodes of The Fall Guy and a lot of things like that. He also does a lot of stunt work. trying to see where he was here. But I was going through it because I saw it earlier, and it was like it's like every modern interpretation of the Swamp Thing, he has been the Swamp Thing. Oh yeah, he was also in Return of the Swamp Thing so he was in the Swamp Thing series from 1990 to 1993. He was in Return of the Swamp Thing in 1989, and he was in the original Swamp Thing movie. Which I can't see. I'm not seeing here. That was like early 80s. Oh, he was the bodyguard in They Call Me Bruce, which was a fun. Oh yeah, in 1980. Oh, just after this episode, he was in the 1982 Swamp Thing as the Swamp Thing. Yes.
Wow.
Okay, and so that is
our
Dick Durock. Well, for the longest time, I always thought in my juvenile mind that was actually Jack LaLanne. Playing,
really?
Well, only because I knew Jack LaLanne was a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
And so, as a youthful person, because you got to remember, this wasn't in syndication strongly when I was a little kid for the most part. So I remembered seeing this, and I remembered seeing Jack LaLanne in various programs that were out there, about being the, world's strongest octogenarian. I think he's actually still alive and still like pulling tugboats with his teeth. So God bless Jack LaLanne. Yeah, he's out there, man. He's still performing feats of strength. But I always assumed it was Jack LaLanne. It's not. But and actually, this guy's much taller than Jack LaLanne because this guy's actually taller than Lou Ferrigno. Which I think when we get to the second episode, we actually get to see the matchup. And I was watching it with my son, and he makes the point. I was like, he says the Hulk is bigger with the muscles because Lou Ferrigno is bulkier, but the other guy's taller. So it's a nice little variation between the two types of Hulks we see.
Yes.
But in this episode, David has heard about that there was this creature, this green creature. Now, I do wonder what really drew him here. Well, I guess they actually had a photo of did they have it? Yeah, they had a photo of the Proto-Hulk. And like when he's going through the old papers, they had that photo of the old-time Hulk,
Yeah.
So, arguably, I guess that's what gave it its credence,
Sure.
But, he had been a Bigfoot sensation monster in the past. So, he should know a little bit better, but this one also had some ties to an actual scientist, so,
Yeah.
It is, you can sort of see why he went through all this
That's his
trouble.
natural curiosity as a scientist, I believe. He just really couldn't help himself.
Yeah. And he gets to town, he's doing his research, he meets a magical African-American character who exists.
Just full of information.
Well, yes, because he's been waiting his whole life for someone to ask. But all anyone in this library wants to do is read books, not talk.
Darn them.
But he gives him
people.
Yes, he gives him the full expository information. Who, when the monster first showed, who was associated with the monster, yada, 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 and who he has to talk to find out more about the monster. And he goes to meet Queen Elizabeth, which is for what it's worth, you really feel a lot of times in the Hulk, this was clearly a show that, in another life would have been a costume drama.
Possibly.
Yeah, people do like to dress up in the Hulk.
Yeah, they do.
Or maybe it's just the fashions of the late 80s, early 70s. But
she was holding her own, that's for sure. She was, whatever era she was from, she was sticking to it.
Yeah.
None of that 80s flare-bottom pants for me, by God. I'm going to sit in this park with my gloves, and I'm going to read my Emily Dickinson, damn it.
There you go. And David does approach her and has a conversation with her about Dr. Colvin, and
Dr. Clive, you mean?
Oh, Dr. Clive, yes. I'm thinking Jack Colvin. My bad.
He's in there, but not quite yet.
Yeah, it's not quite yet. But Dr. Clive, who you know, was the scientist, and then we see these two young men who clearly do not have jobs at this point in their story.
No, they don't. They're very hostile too.
Oh, well, you know, they were clearly troublemakers. Honestly, there are times where you think there might be something in the water in this town.
I did make a, yeah, you're in my head again.
Yeah.
Because the beginning part of this, looks like a scene out of a slasher film. We're all shouting at each other, oh, let's get off the road, and my dad's going to kill me, and let's go to this old spooky house where we know people were killed in it to see if they have a telephone.
Well,
you know? And then everybody's like yelling and shouting, and I'm like, wow, what is in the water in this place? Everybody's so hostile.
Yeah, and it does surprise me that they go into the house that is supposed to be abandoned to look for a phone, which theoretically, even if they had a phone, it should be disconnected.
You would think so.
But then they don't go anywhere where a phone might be. Like you'd expect the phone to be like in the kitchen. Or in
a hallway, or they had those phone tables back then. You sit there and you pick up the phone.
Yeah, you would think it would be in a relatively centrally located place, but they go and they start climbing around and investigating and get to the lab where they start pulling levers because
yeah, because that's what you do.
I wonder what this red button do.
Yeah.
On the long list of dumb ways to die. Yes.
Yeah, that should be like number 10.
Yes. There's actually a song called Dumb Ways to Die that my children just love. And it's all about very dumb ways to die. It was actually produced by the English Metro Mass Transit rail system.
Oh, okay.
Because the dumbest way to die is you play on railroad crossings.
Oh, okay. It actually sounded like something Flight of the Conchords would do, but...
well, but it is very, very strange and morbid humor, you scratch a drug dealer's brand new ride, eat a 3-week-old unrefrigerated pie. These are all dumb ways to die. It's a good song. It's all over the internet. They've made a little flash game for it. It's fun. But one of the things that they say is dumb ways to die is you ask, what does this red button do? And sure enough, here a young man goes into a lab, sees all the equipment, starts flipping switches and pushing buttons, and sure enough, he dies.
Yes, he does. Bless his heart.
Yeah. And this is important to some extent because the murderer in this situation has no superpowers at this moment.
No.
He has no excuse other than his own violent nature, and that is now. Of course, you don't know who that is, although I think it's pretty obvious by the time we really start to meet him. Because we do meet the old groundskeeper, because Queen Elizabeth does feel for David's plight because he is a scientist like her one true love, Dr. Clive. And gives him the key to the house. And he's snooping around, and he meets Del Fry, who is our groundskeeper, who is doesn't want to give any help to anyone. And then again, our two teenage troublemakers show up again. Because what saved David the first time was the sheriff showed up. But here they're going to go harass David and young Mr. Fry, or old Mr. Fry himself, again. Yeah. And, of course, this leads to David falling down a well. And once he is out of sight, we know what happens next. We get a Hulk out.
We do.
And we get two young thugs thrown a great distance. One has a bag of flour thrown on him. Which, again, it's impressive that doesn't cause more damage, but I'm guessing. Yeah. Well, you assume the Hulk did like a glancing collision with it. He knew it would knock him down, and but the forward momentum would be, would
the
be
flour
angular.
bag was only set to stun, so yeah.
Essentially. So he So the boys run off, and then the Hulk runs off. Oh no, the boys don't run off because they got knocked out, but they get away eventually
Yeah.
because the Hulk runs off, as he does, because
Yeah.
he's a Hulk and he's very confused.
Mm-hmm.
But our Del Fry chases him down.
Yeah.
And guides, and this is one of the things I thought was most interesting, is that the Hulk is in a completely calm state, but stays the Hulk all the way back to the house.
Yeah.
You know, you would think I was expecting you to be like leading in, actual torn shirt David. No,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
No.
no, it's still the Hulk hanging out. Being a
Yeah.
very gentle Hulk, one might point out, And then once he's at the lab, he turns back.
Yeah. I think they did that on purpose. I think this is just me spitballing here, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they wanted to see the stark contrast between the two.
Yeah.
That even though David's, Hulk-induced transformations are fueled by rage, he knows how to turn it off.
Yes.
He has enough wherewithal to turn it off where, not to spoil anything for anybody, but the first Hulk is just completely fueled by rage, period.
Yes.
And he has no filtering system.
And not for nothing, we do realize that Dr. Clive really needed a better test subject to work with here.
Definitely.
This was like the
This
worst guy.
Anger from like a long time with people picking on him and bullying him and all of that. So yeah.
Although, for what it's worth, as the character of Bruce Banner in the comic books has evolved over the years, as I see Del Fry, I see him much more in line with how they've depicted Bruce as this man who was abused as a young person, who is frail and sickly and weak, and that's why he turns into the Hulk.
Right.
And in that sense, this Hulk, the more violent Hulk, bears a lot more resemblance to, certain alternate versions of the Hulk we've seen, such as the future imperfect Hulk, or even just like the Ultimate Hulk, where the Hulk is a lot more violent, a lot more tuned into Banner's id. And I think that meets this Hulk very similarly, because this Hulk has killed people, literally ripped people apart, and that is a horrifying idea.
Yes.
Anyway, so David is talking to our groundskeeper, who explains to him that he used to be a Hulk, and how becoming the Hulk healed him. And this actually becomes an important point, because this is going to come up in 2 episodes' time. The episode after the second half of this is The Harder They Fall, where the Hulk's healing factor becomes a central plot point. In this case, the groundskeeper recognizes who David is and is trying to get David to help him out. And what I thought and this was an interesting thing for me, because so the groundskeeper basically tells David, well, I know where the extra books are, so I can give you the extra books. And he says, and I guess the doctor didn't write down enough of the details of his cure. So in the journal, it doesn't say, 2 parts, saltpeter to 1 part dihydrogen monoxide. It's it's just says, but it does give him the warning that he feels that because of the subject's nature, the Hulks are far more dangerous.
Yeah.
And so that's our first warning.
Yeah.
But the Hulk does tell him, Fry does tell him that, hey, here's what's left of the cure.
Yeah.
And this is how this whole works. And, what's interesting to me in this whole thing is this idea that, Fry has kept the machines running all this time. He's kept everything tip-top and ready to go. And what we see is that all he had to do was actually just turn the machine on and expose himself to the gamma rays, and he could be a Hulk again.
Yeah.
But he never did this. And part of me is always thinking, well, why? why.
Uh-huh.
And there's what I've sort of developed as my fan theory.
Yeah.
He needed the scientist to come in and tell him how the system worked. Because he
Right.
might have thought, oh, yeah, it's the gamma rays or it's the machine,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't really know the mechanism. I don't really know what's
Right.
going on. I don't know if this is really going to work.
Right.
And he gets David to come there, gets David to be enticed by the idea of a cure. And
Mm-hmm.
then Fry says to David, before you cure yourself, you have to
Mm-hmm.
help me too. You've got to let me become a Hulk
Right.
because I want to be healed again. Because he makes the point earlier that, when he was a frail and sickly child, turning into a Hulk got rid of all of his problems. He
Right.
suddenly was no longer sickly, and that's
Right.
important. Um, uh, Fry knocks David out, because of course,
Mm-hmm.
that is the Hulk's one weakness. If you hit him in the back of the neck, he goes out like a
Yeah.
sack of
Bless
potatoes.
his heart. Yeah.
And he turns on the machines to expose himself, and he's lying there getting all gamma rayed up. David does come to, realizes what's going on, goes to turn off the machine, and the Fry just starts screaming, "No, no, no! Don't take this away from me!" And then he hulks out.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is important because it gives a great parallel into the next episode
Yeah.
of what makes you mad enough to Hulk out. So Fry turns into a Hulk. He
Mm-hmm.
runs out of the lab and tears off the gate on the cave that leads out of the lab through the secret passage.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the end of this first episode of the first part 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I did find interesting is that this, as we said, this Hulk is not as bulky, so he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't tear out of his clothes quite so much.
No.
So much as he just pops the buttons on his shirt, and then he's still wearing a shirt and pants, and then his pants become floods because he grows an extra 3 or 4 inches.
Yeah.
So aside from, but it was neat to see. It was neat to see how they handled this Proto Hulk. Although the transition with the freeze frame to the new Hulk face was a little on the nose, a little obvious, I felt. But
Oh, absolutely. It was extremely, very 1950s B-rated, sci-fi. I'm transforming into the werewolf,
yeah, well, and
i.e.
to that extent,
monster.
yeah, to that extent, they certainly gave the Hulk the "I was a teenage werewolf" haircut.
They did, didn't they?
Yes. A little annoyed we didn't get a Hulk fight here, but they have to. They're saving that up. They're saving that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got our 2 Hulks, although only one was Lou Ferrigno. And he does run off, and that's where we leave it for the next episode. Okay. Final thoughts tonight, 80s music, Earl?
Well, right at the beginning, they had a nice little bit of synthesized music that I thought, oh, that's interesting. Little touch of the 80s new wave there. I appreciate that. And then the rest of it was completely typical Hulk music. And I was like, oh, bummer. David was talking to somebody. I can't remember if it was Elizabeth or the sheriff about how many people this monster's killed. And the look on David's face was just like, yeah, I get it. Dead people. Tell me more about Dr. Clive. Really.
Yes.
It was like, oh, come on, David. Surely you can't be that, set apart from all the tragedy. But
yeah, he can.
I guess he just wasn't having any of that. I'll remorse later, but
Yes.
need more information. Because this is all about me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it was cool to see old school Hulk. That's kind of how I played it out. Old school Hulk back in the day, and new improved Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so you get to see
Yeah, I do think that Banner's experiment is an improvement on the old Hulk. He is a bigger Hulk. He is a stronger Hulk. I feel it just but I mean, he had the advantage of more focused gamma ray technology, whereas
Yes, he did.
first Hulk had to deal with whatever the sun happened to throw out on that day.
This is true.
Okay, so 80s Music Girl, if anyone wants to reach out to you to talk to you about the Incredible Hulk or 80s music or being a girl, how can they find you?
I am at 80s Music Girl on Twitter. I have an 80s Music Girl fan page on Facebook. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and liking. I really appreciate you. And I'm 80s Music Girl on Instagram.
Awesome. And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Maz and Paz once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet these very shows. The Incredible Hulk, 7 o'clock on Saturdays on MeTV for as long as it lasts, at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for hulking out with us. Please hulk out with us again. Roar!
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.